Tonight, we travel back more than 1,000 years to a cold and silver world of misty shores and dark northern seas. Imagine the year is somewhere in the 9th century. The air is sharp with salt and pine. A small coastal village lies quiet under the pale glow of the moon. Wooden houses with thatched roofs rest close together, their walls creaking gently as the wind brushes past. Inside, families sleep beside low-burning hearth fires. The only sounds are soft breathing, the occasional shifting of straw bedding, and the distant rhythm of waves against the shore. But far beyond the visible horizon, long before the villagers ever sense it, something is already moving across the water. Low, narrow ships glide silently over the sea. Their curved prows rise like the necks of patient serpents. Oars dip in and out of the water in slow, practiced rhythm. No one speaks. The men aboard know the language of silence. They have traveled for days, guided by stars, currents, and memory. These are the seafarers we now call Vikings, though in their own tongue they were Norsemen farmers, traders, explorers, and, when opportunity appeared, raiders. In the darkness, they become something else entirely, shadows on the water. The village continues to sleep. To understand how entire settlements could vanish in a single night, we must first understand the world these raiders came from. Scandinavia in the early Middle Ages was a land of deep fjords, rocky soil, and long winters. Farming was difficult. Communities were small and scattered. Wealth was limited. Yet the people of this region possessed something extraordinary: unmatched skill at sea. Their ships were marvels of design. Long, flexible hulls built with overlapping planks allowed them to survive rough ocean waves while remaining light enough to be carried over land. They could cross open seas, navigate narrow rivers, and land directly on beaches without harbors. This mobility gave them an advantage that few European communities were prepared to counter. Back in the sleeping village, a dog stirs. Perhaps it senses a shift in the wind. Perhaps it hears the faint scrape of wood against pebbled shore. The ships have arrived, and like the image of chaotic warriors charging wildly, many Viking raids were carefully timed and quietly executed. They preferred surprise. The element of night was not always used, but when it was devastating. Monasteries, coastal farms, trading towns, these places rarely had walls or standing armies. The early medieval world was fragmented. Communication was slow. Defense was local. And on an ordinary night, most people believed the sea was a boundary, not a highway. The first raiders step onto the shore. Leather boots press into wet sand. The oars are lifted silently aboard. A few men remain to guard the ships. The others move quickly inland, guided by memory or prior knowledge. Sometimes they had visited before as traders. Sometimes they had informants. Sometimes they simply followed rivers that led them directly to wealth. Inside the village, no alarm bells ring. It is important to remember that not every Viking expedition was a storm of fire and destruction. Many Norse voyages were peaceful, focused on trade in furs, amber, silver, and slaves. Yet when they raided, speed was everything. The goal was not occupation. It was impact. Arrive fast. Seize valuables. Leave before organized resistance formed. The first house is entered. A door forced quietly. A blade at the throat of a waking man. A child crying before being silenced. Gold arm rings removed. Storage chests broken open. Grain, tools, livestock, whatever could be carried was taken. If resistance rose, it was crushed quickly. Confusion spread faster than any organized defense. In many early medieval communities, there were no permanent soldiers. Most able-bodied men were farmers who might possess a spear or axe, but at 2 a.m, pulled from sleep, coordination was almost impossible. Fire, once started, turned wooden homes into torches. Smoke and panic did the rest. And yet, as terrifying as this scene sounds, it is also strangely quiet. There are no cannons, no thunder of gunpowder, only shouting, crackling timber, and the distant surf. Within an hour, perhaps less, the work is done. By dawn, the ships are already fading into mist. The psychological impact of such raids was enormous. News traveled slowly, but fear traveled quickly. A monastery burned in one region sent tremors through distant kingdoms. Chronicles written by monks describe these attackers as demons from the north, punishments from God, unstoppable pagans descending without warning. These accounts, written by victims, shaped much of how we imagine Vikings today. But history is rarely one-sided. For the Norse raiders, these expeditions were often seasonal. In spring and summer, when seas were calmer, ships set out. In autumn, they return home with silver, textiles, livestock, and captives who could be ransomed or sold. Wealth accumulated not only in individual households, but across entire communities. Power shifted. Chiefs grew stronger. Ambitious leaders gathered followings by promising success abroad. The night raid became part of a larger system. Some villages did not vanish because they were destroyed entirely, but because survivors fled. As settlement attacked repeatedly might be abandoned. Coastal populations moved inland. Trade routes shifted. Over time, maps changed. What had once been a thriving port could become a silent stretch of marsh and grass. Imagine returning to such a place years later. The outlines of foundations barely visible. Charred beams buried beneath soil. A well filled with leaves. Birds nesting where children once played. Time covers everything gently. Not all Viking encounters ended in smoke. In some regions, repeated raids eventually turned into settlements. Norse groups overwintered, established camps, and negotiated tribute. In parts of England and Ireland, they founded towns that still exist today. What began as night attacks evolved into political control, intermarriage, and cultural blending. But in the early phase, especially in the late 8th and 9th centuries, the shock was profound. Why were these villages so vulnerable? Part of the answer lies in geography. Europe's coastline is deeply indented with rivers and estuaries. A longship could travel upriver far beyond the sight of the open sea. Communities believed themselves safe miles inland, yet waterways became corridors for sudden arrival. Another part lies in communication. Without rapid messaging systems, there was no early warning network. A burning monastery in one region did not instantly alert another. Each attack felt isolated, unpredictable. And then there was the element of ritual and religion. Many early targets were monasteries, not because they were defenseless alone, but because they were wealthy. Monasteries stored precious metals, illuminated manuscripts, and food supplies. They were centers of learning and faith, but also of accumulated resources. To a raiding band seeking portable wealth, they were obvious targets. In the stillness of night, sacred spaces offered no protection against iron. Yet the story does not end in violence alone. As decades passed, defensive measures emerged. Coastal watch posts were built. Fortified towns, known as burhs in some regions, were established. Kings reorganized military obligations. Shipbuilding techniques spread. The very presence of Viking raids reshaped European political structures. Out of fear came adaptation. Let us return once more to the sleeping village, but this time imagine it later in the century. The memory of past attacks lingers. A wooden palisade surrounds the settlement. A lookout tower stands near the shore. A horn rests ready to sound alarm. Men take turns watching the horizon at dusk. The sea remains dark, but now it is watched. When ships appear, the horn sounds. Villagers gather behind defenses. Resistance forms. The element of surprise weakens. Some raids fail. Some ships retreat empty-handed. The balance shifts slowly, year by year. History often feels like a tie itself. And yet, for many smaller communities, especially in the early decades, the experience was sudden and irreversible. Archaeological evidence in certain coastal regions shows layers of burning corresponding to this error. Silver hoards buried hastily suggest panic. People hid valuables underground, intending to return, but sometimes never did. These buried treasures, discovered centuries later, are quiet witnesses to nights of fear. It is easy in modern times to imagine such events as constant, relentless storms. In truth, raids were episodic. Years might pass peacefully. Trade relationships could exist alongside hostility. A Norse trader one summer might return as a raider another, depending on shifting alliances and opportunities. Human motives are rarely simple. For the Vikings themselves, the sea was not merely a path to wealth but to identity. Exploration defined them. They reached as far as North America, deep into Eastern Europe, and across the North Atlantic. Their mobility expanded the known world. Yet mobility also made them unpredictable. When a village vanished overnight, it was often because speed outran response. There is a haunting stillness in imagining dawn after such a raid. Smoke drifting upward. Survivors stepping cautiously from hiding. The sea empty again, as if nothing had happened. Footprints in sand already softening beneath wind. The horizon calm. Silence returns quickly after violence. Over generations, stories transformed memory into legend. Dragons carved on ship prows grew more monstrous in retelling. Raiders became giants in saga literature. Fear amplified their image. At the same time, Norse sagas told from their own perspective emphasized bravery, honor, and destiny. Two sides of the same night. Modern archaeology and scholarship paint a more nuanced picture. DNA evidence, trade goods, settlement patterns will reveal complexity. Some so-called raids may have involved negotiation or internal conflict within targeted regions. Political rivals sometimes invited Norse allies. The line between invader and partner blurred. But for a small forming family awakened by firelight reflecting off iron blades, nuance mattered little. Their world changed in minutes. It is worth reflecting on how vulnerable medieval life was. No emergency services. No rapid reinforcements. Communities relied on mutual support and faith. When both failed under surprise attack, survival depended on instinct and luck. And yet humanity endured. From the ashes of destroyed settlements grew fortified towns. From scattered survivors emerged stronger kingdoms. The Viking Age, often dated from the late 8th century to the mid-11th, eventually transformed into integration. Norse rulers converted to Christianity. Trade networks stabilized. Descendants of raiders became kings, knights, and merchants within European society. The night raids faded into memory, but the image remains powerful because it touches something universal. The fragility of safety. The idea that beneath a calm sky, unseen forces may already be moving. That the sea, beautiful and rhythmic, can carry both traders and warriors. As we gently close this journey, imagine once more the quiet village. Not the moment of attack, but the hours before. The warmth of the hearth. The soft murmur of family conversation. The simple trust that morning will come as it always has. History reminds us that change often arrives unannounced. Yet it also reminds us that communities rebuild, that fear reshapes into resilience, that even after the darkest night, dawn spreads slowly across rooftops, revealing both loss and possibility. The Vikings did not erase Europe. They altered it. Through violence and trade, settlement and story, they became part of the very fabric of the lands they once startled from sleep. And somewhere along a northern shore, longships rest now only in museums and memory. The sea continues its endless breathing. Villages stand with stone walls and electric lights. Night still falls, but the horizon is watched by satellites instead of sentries. The past drifts like mist across water, never fully gone, never fully solid.